Hello, and welcome. Sorry for the delay. We got some audio problems, but should be sorted now. And so, welcome to the ArtsTech 2012 seminars. And to start things off, I'll just invite Henry Brade to come on stage and tell us about Bitcoins. He's the founder of bittiraha.fi, and without further delay, welcome.
Can you hear me? Is this on? Now? Now, it's good. Oh, sorry for the delay. Okay, so this is the unofficial opening ceremony of Assembly, and it has the unofficial opening ceremony of Assembly has one big thing in common. It's that it's late. It's always late, but the official one will probably be late as well, so it's not a big deal. So I'm here to tell you about Bitcoin, and one of the founders of bittiraha.fi, and we're a Finnish site. I'll tell you more about it later. And most of you have probably read my bio. It's like I've been in the zeitgeist movement, social activist stuff, and played poker, so on. But now I've been, for the 1.5 years almost, I've been concentrating on Bitcoin, which I think is a really interesting, really fascinating thing. Let's go on. Okay, so here's the content. I have to compress the content a little bit because we have some time issues here. But basically, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Bitcoin and bittiraha.fi, the basics, then how to use them, how does it work, why Bitcoin, that's the biggest thing, and challenges and the future. But I'll go through this pretty quickly because of the time constrictions. Okay, so basics. What is Bitcoin? It's the first decentralized open source digital currency, and the key word is decentralized. There's no banks or no centralized computers or anything like that, centralized databases. There's basically a decentralized system, a decentralized network, just like a BitTorrent or internet itself. And Bitcoin was created in 2009 by a guy whose name is Satoshi Nakamoto, or it could be a girl as well, or a group of people. We don't know. It's actually the biggest mystery of Bitcoin. The actual founder has remained anonymous until now. It's really interesting, but the whole software is open source, and it's developed like many other open source programs. So basically, there's other developers that continued his work after he left the development program in like 2010. And it's developed and maintained by a community of Bitcoin enthusiasts. So there's no top-down system in Bitcoin. It's just anyone who's interested can participate, use it, or develop it. If you have the skills to develop a program, you can contribute to the Bitcoin development. And two of the biggest things, there are a lot of big things about Bitcoin, but two big things are it allows anonymous online payments. Well, it's not technically entirely anonymous, but it's more anonymous than any other digital payment method. And with Bitcoin, your money cannot be frozen. That's pretty big deal, because there's this company called PayPal, which I like to call PayPay, and they like to freeze people's money, and not just like illegitimate stuff, also legitimate stuff have been frozen many times. There's a lot of documented cases online. So with Bitcoin, freezing anyone's money is basically impossible, because the so-called accounts, Bitcoin accounts, are decentralized in tens of thousands or more, hundreds of thousands of computers all over the world. So closing down Bitcoin or the funds behind Bitcoin accounts is pretty much impossible. Okay, so what is bittiraha.fi? So the decentralized nature of Bitcoin and the open nature of it makes it really a bit problematic to find all the information in one place. So we tried to make this kind of site that we have all you need as a Bitcoin user, but it's concentrated for the Finnish people, because the other problem is that the information is mostly in English in the Bitcoin sites. So we have basically the first portal type site for Bitcoin in Finnish. Okay, so I'll go through the basics of how to use Bitcoin first, so you know how it works. And first, you need a Bitcoin wallet, and there's different types of wallets. You can install one on a PC, on any type of PC, you can, Windows, Linux, Mac, and mobile wallets for any smartphones. It doesn't matter, but the best support for Bitcoin is in the Android system, but also any other. You have to maybe use a web wallet for those phones. But there's an easy to use wallet such as Easy Wallet. The developer of Easy Wallet is here in assembly, so you can go talk to him at our stand later. And then there's paper wallets. Paper wallets are basically not really usable as such. You don't use them to pay stuff with Bitcoin, but you use them to store your Bitcoin savings, so you can store them in a paper wallet safely, so the hackers can't get to them. So it's one of those safe methods. Another safe method is Brain Wallet, but that's to me personally a little bit trickier, because you have to memorize a certain phrase of a word and so you remember the private key. But I'll talk about the private keys later, so you understand what I'm talking about. That doesn't make much sense yet. So when you have a wallet, a PC wallet, a mobile wallet, you can send and receive Bitcoins. So Bitcoins are actually, they are monetary units. So that's the Bitcoin network, which is called Bitcoin. It's the technology, the open source technology. Then there's the units behind it, because it's a digital currency of itself. It has units called Bitcoins, which you can buy, you can mine, you can sell stuff to get Bitcoins, and so on. You can put a donation address to your blog and get Bitcoins that way. That's actually a pretty common way. Bitcoins are good for a gift economy, they're good for trade, good for basically anything. And to send Bitcoins to someone, you need to know the Bitcoin address. There's the example of it. It looks like, well, that one is actually an address that's computed with purpose. So it reads the Finnish word kisa, which is competition. That's actually the first competition Bitcoin address we use in our QR code competition. So let's go on. The Bitcoin addresses, because they are just basically random strings of numbers and letters, they are hard to remember, so the common use is to copy-paste them to your Bitcoin wallet on a PC. You can also create a URI link, which is getting more common. It's the same as HTTP link. So when a user has their wallet in a mobile phone or a PC, they can just click the link and it opens automatically the send Bitcoins window, and even you can put other stuff in the links. You can put the amount of Bitcoins to send automatically, so the user who sends doesn't need to do anything except just push send. So it's really easy. But a really popular method that's been used more and more is QR codes. It's actually, QR codes are really, most people think they're quite boring because there's nothing else you can do with them. Just scan a QR code and you get a URL address, like a link to some website. That's really boring, but with Bitcoin it's actually a lot more interesting to use QR codes. The future method will be NFC. That's really, really interesting. It's like the short distance radio waves technology. You can just put the device close to the other device or the NFC tag, and then you can send Bitcoins that way, and they're actually reusable. So that's going to be the future method for a lot of other stuff as well, but for Bitcoin also. But QR codes are pretty useful. Here's an example of one. This is the actual, you can try to scan this yourself if you want to. This is the actual code for the QR code competition. The point of that competition is to find the most of these codes. The one who finds the most and is able to send some small amounts of Bitcoins to the addresses win prizes, pretty good prizes. And so this is the first one. This is the same one that's in our stand, and I'll show you myself how it works. So basically, I have this Android phone here. Android has the best support, but you can use any kind of smartphone using web wallet like Easy Wallet. Just basically scan that code. Shouldn't be a big deal.
Speak louder.
Okay, I speak louder. So now I scanned the code, that's it. It was really fast. And it gives me the address and the amount of Bitcoins to send automatically. I just push send. I need to do nothing else but push send. And now it's done. That receiving the address, that Bitcoin transaction is instantly there, and so that's it. It's really quick when you get the hang of it, and it's a much more interesting way to use QR codes than that just have a URL address. We have a small one there that's for the instructions. That's just the basic one. Okay. Now that you know a little bit about how it works, how it's used, you have to think about what's behind it a little bit. So basically, Bitcoin is a decentralized peer-to-peer network. I talked about that a little bit earlier. So it's like internet or BitTorrent or like that. There's a lot of similarities, which is good. And it utilizes a number of different techniques. I'll talk about them a little. One of the key technologies, this is one of the most important ones, is called public key cryptography. And the all Bitcoin users have Bitcoin addresses which are actually public keys. And the address you saw earlier, it was the one Kisa and something. That's a public key. Those are all totally public information. So Bitcoin is changing the traditional notion of what is public and what is private. When you have like a bank account, it's exactly the reverse of Bitcoin. So basically, the owners of the bank accounts are totally known, but what happens is only known between the bank accounts is only known by the banks. Nobody else knows what's going on. It's not a transparent system. With Bitcoin, it's exactly the opposite. We know everything because the whole database of all Bitcoin transactions are stored and in the decentralized network. Every user has that information, so you know that this address is sending that address this amount of Bitcoins. It's always known. We know all the information since Bitcoin began in 2009. There's like a lot of transactions since, and that's really interesting, but what makes it anonymous is that you don't actually know who's behind each address. So you have just a random string of numbers or letters. If you can link that address to some identity, which is possible if the user is careless or doesn't care about the anonymity, you can do it pretty easily. But if the user cares about the anonymity, it's pretty much impossible to find who's behind a single Bitcoin address. I don't know a single case that anyone's been able to do that if the user has taken some precautions with their Bitcoin usage. If you want to use it anonymously, you can read online some tips you can mix your coins in some public pools, so all the coins you use are totally untraceable. There's simple methods to do that if you like. And the private keys are the other part of the cryptography thing, and they are stored in the wallet, which you install in the PC or the mobile phone. You have the private key, which allows access to the Bitcoins. So the one who has the private key has access to the Bitcoins in a certain address. So the address I shown you earlier, the one Kisa or something, it has a corresponding private key, and it's a similar technology that's used in a lot of other stuff. So it is fairly safe, and it cannot be cracked. So continuing. Okay, so most of the technologies behind Bitcoin were already invented and in use when Bitcoin was created, but one thing wasn't. That's the biggest problem in a decentralized currency, because in a centralized currency you have a central database, you can just do everything there, there's no problem. But when you go decentralized, you have like nodes all over the internet who are using this. The problem of double spending and counterfeiting the money is really a big problem. No one was able to do this before 2009, and the solution was the blockchain. This is probably the most important part, technological part of Bitcoin, after the public key cryptography. They are both pretty important. So the blockchain is a record of all the transactions in the Bitcoin network since the beginning. There's all the transactions. And now we go to Bitcoin mining, which is Bitcoin miners create new blocks into the blockchain every 10 minutes by solving a mathematical puzzle. This is really important stuff. Mining adds an artificial challenge to creating the blocks, so that you can't just do it like printing money like they do in the banks. So you cannot print Bitcoins like that. It requires electricity and requires computers to do, and so on. And the thing is that most people just think that they are creating the money by the mining. that's not actually true. That's a side issue. The main issue is that the miners actually are upholding and maintaining the entire Bitcoin network. It cannot work without mining because the miners confirm all the Bitcoin transactions. That's the way they get forever solidified in the Bitcoin blockchain. So they cannot be counterfeited or double spent after that. And it takes an average 10 minutes for one confirmation. One is pretty safe. You can mostly rely on one confirmation, but if you're transferring a lot of money, big amounts of money, then you might want to wait 3 confirmations, or even the 6 that some recommend. 6 takes on average 1 hour, and 3 takes on average 30 minutes. But usually you're fine with that, just waiting 10 minutes, and you can just accept it most of the time instantly, because the transaction is propagated to the network instantly. Then it just takes for the miners a little bit to confirm it with the blockchain. The blockchain solved the problem of double spending and counterfeiting. It was a big deal. This is so far the only method of having a workable decentralized currency of this type. It's the only way. But there might be other ways in the future when cryptocurrencies evolve, but it's a really difficult puzzle. A lot of smart people have been thinking about it. This is the answer so far. But it was also the answer to the question of how to create new bitcoins non-politically. Because you have in a current monetary system, we have the central banks and the government who decide how we create the money and how it gets out. So with Bitcoin, you have no political interest to decide anything. So it's a system. And for each new block that the miners create, and they invest computing power and electricity to do that, they get awarded 50 bitcoins. So that's the way the new bitcoins come into existence. And this is a graph of how new bitcoins are created over time. This goes from 2009 to 2033. Basically, this means that the amount of new bitcoins will reduce over time. And currently, we have about 9.5 million bitcoins. We're going to have 99.9% of bitcoins created in 2040. In 2140, it's going to be all the bitcoins ever have been created, and the system has been designed in a way that it's basically infinitely divisible. So even if the value of one bitcoin goes up, you're still going to be able to use it quite nicely. In fact, in theory, you could use just one single bitcoin to run the entire world economy. If you would have to probably add a few decimals, but currently there's 8 decimals, and 21 million bitcoins will be quite enough for the whole world economy, even if Bitcoin became a universal currency. So that's pretty interesting. This is like a totally opposite monetary theory to what the current system is with the euro and dollar, where the system is based on we just print more money all the time. And it's based on getting more debt and so far. With Bitcoin, the whole system is based more on savings instead of debt, and it's a totally different philosophy. So in a way, in many ways, it's a competitive currency to the current system, not only technically, but also in an economical way. So, okay, the conclusion. If the usage of Bitcoin grows, the value of each Bitcoin will increase over time, but the big part of this, the important part is if. Nobody knows how Bitcoin is going to go. It might be that Bitcoin has been maxed out now, nobody's going to use it in a few years. That's entirely possible. And then again, nobody knew in 2 years' time, like 2010, they didn't know. I have some friends who noticed Bitcoin in 2010, the value was in the cents. So it was like 10 cents per Bitcoin. They didn't get interested in it. They thought it was some silly thing. And now 1 Bitcoin is like 8 euros for 1 Bitcoin. So it has from 2010, the value has increased like tens of thousands of percents or something. It's gone a lot bigger. Even though there has been a lot more Bitcoins, there was only like a few million back then because the mining has been going on all the time. And I already said about the divisible thing, there's 8 decimals, and there's units you can use to replace BTC, which is the common unit. So if, for instance, the value would be higher, you wouldn't like to use, because humans don't like to use decimals a lot because it's not convenient. You don't want to pay like 0.00053 bitcoins to pay for something. That's stupid. So there's already most of the Bitcoin wallets support changing the balance to MBTC or even microbits, which are 100,000 of a Bitcoin. So that's already like, they have thought about this stuff, and there's actually services that already use millibits instead of Bitcoins, because the prices in those services, like where they trade virtual items for Diablo 2 and Diablo 3 and all that stuff, most of that stuff that they trade is really cheap. And there's one Bitcoin site that is fairly popular, and they use like millibitcoins instead of Bitcoins, because Bitcoins are too valuable to use every day for trading virtual goods. Okay, why Bitcoin? So Bitcoin is best thought of as a technology protocol, such as HTTP, and anyone can start using it at any time. That's what makes it very different from like Visa or PayPal or any kind of payment system. So you can just start using it. You don't have to ask anyone. You don't need any permissions. You can just start using it. You can start developing it. You can start doing services around it, anything. And like email and the web and so on, the voice IP communications, they lower the cost of communication. Bitcoin lowers the cost of sending money, actually quite dramatically. Actually, I probably have something about that later, about the fees of Bitcoin system to talk about then. So Bitcoin brings the power of the internet to the realm of money. That has never been done before. That's pretty big in my opinion. And Bitcoin doesn't offer anything else. It's just a method to store and send Bitcoin. So it's basically, it's a monetary system, but there's a lot of entrepreneurs that are doing services around Bitcoin. They have been increasing rapidly. There's a lot more, all kinds of stuff, like there's dozens of exchanges where you can buy and sell Bitcoins. They're getting more professional, even though there have been some pretty disastrous hacks and stolen Bitcoins in those exchanges, and that's not good. But I think that's a learning process, because Bitcoin is internet money. You need to be careful with internet money. So when you store a lot of Bitcoins in one place and people know you store a lot of Bitcoins there, of course you have to up the security to, I'd say, a really high level. But for a regular Bitcoin user, that's really not a worry, because the big hackers are not after a regular Bitcoin user who has 5 Bitcoins. They're after the services that have thousands, tens of thousands, or hundreds of thousands of Bitcoins. But even a regular user can fairly easily put their Bitcoins to safety if they want to. If they want to keep them safe, they can put a paper wallet or encrypted wallet with a password in a computer that's safe. There's a lot of methods to safely store Bitcoins if someone is afraid of hackers and so on. And there's a lot of information on how to do it online. And from a business perspective, Bitcoin has a very low barrier of entry. So because you don't have to pay anyone to use Bitcoin, you don't have to make any contracts to use Bitcoin. Even really small companies can start using Bitcoin just like that. So Bitcoin is a digital currency, and it has no intrinsic value. So a lot of people ask, why is it then valuable? Because it's really nothing but like zeros and ones in a computer. So the really simple answer is that they are scarce, because there's a limited number of them. They are secure. The Bitcoin itself is really secure, and it's really useful. So those are the 3 things. And supply and demand decide the value. The governments or the banks don't have anything to do with Bitcoin. It's only supply and demand in the market. Who wants to buy Bitcoins, who wants to sell them, and so on. The exchange rate has been really volatile. We had a super bubble, like speculative bubble in last summer 2011, but that has like deflated a long time ago, and it was really stable at $5 for like 5 months early this year. Now it's going up again a lot, and there probably will be more bubbles, but that problem is related to the small size of Bitcoin, because if you have an economy that has that's still starting and is small, it's really expected to have some volatility because there's so many people in the world who can just buy a lot of bitcoins, try to manipulate the market. But that is expected to become more stable through time. As the economy gets bigger, it's more difficult for a single player in the economy to affect the price with buying bitcoins or selling bitcoins. Okay. Unlike traditional payment methods, Bitcoin transfers happen almost free of charge. This is the fees. The basic fee, which is currently even, it's optional. It's basically to support the mining network, the miners, and the miners can decide to not like include a transaction into a block if the block has too many transactions going on or something like that. So then they start to prioritize a little bit. But the recommended fee is 0.0005 bitcoins, which is with the current price, it's somewhere between that number and 0.004 euros. So compared to like paying with PayPal or something like that, Visa, it's ridiculously cheap. And Bitcoin transfers are irreversible, making chargeback fraud impossible. Companies lose billions every year to chargeback fraud. Usually the one who loses the money directly is Visa, but the fees of Visa are higher because they have to pay for the chargeback fees, fraud. So that's a pretty big deal. And there's also a lot of hundreds of millions lost every year for consumer side for the identity thefts, because that's a pretty big deal. With Bitcoin, when you go to an e-commerce site, like you pay with them, you don't have to put any information on your credit card or something like that. They give you an address which you pay yourself from your own computer, or from your own wallet. So you don't leave any information like that. And you often don't even need to leave any identities, because Bitcoin don't require the identity of the person who buys. Of course, the site can ask that, but Bitcoin itself doesn't require it. Bitcoins can get exchanged to real-world currencies and virtual currencies in dozens of exchanges. Second Life is the biggest virtual currency exchange. It's used a lot. Growing amount of merchants accept it. The first restaurant in Finland just opened, called Vegemesta, opened Bitcoin with Bitcoin payments. It's been opened before. Okay. I'll go through the end really quickly. So, why should you use Bitcoin? You can pay online, stay anonymous while you're there. Money can't be frozen. All the payments can be cheaper, more convenient, involve less middlemen. There's no banks, no Visa, no PayPal, nothing like that. Sending money globally is much faster and cheaper. If you want to send money to China, it's a lot cheaper with Bitcoin than with conventional methods, and much faster. Bitcoin uses remittance, donations, contributions, crowdsourcing, crowdfunding, microloans. Those are one of my favorites. Savings, investing. It's a savings currency because of the limited amount of Bitcoins. Trading of virtual goods is getting bigger. Purchase for goods and services, business-to-business payments. And by now you hopefully have an idea why Bitcoins have some value, around a little less than 8 euros of one Bitcoin right now. And it's an experimental currency that's being developed by the open source community all the time. The official Bitcoin program is still in beta version. It's like 0.6 something. So it's a long way to go for that. The challenges, I talked about a little bit about this. So there's like the volatility to exchange rate. It's going to get better. The hacks of the third-party services and loss of Bitcoins, there's been a lot of that. Bitcoin itself has never been hacked. So it's just the services around it, so you have to be careful where you put your Bitcoins. Criminal usage, Bitcoin is used for all kinds of stuff. So the same applies to euro and the dollar and cash. They are used for criminal stuff as well, so it's really hypocritical to like single out Bitcoin's criminal usage. It's a free market and people trade illegitimate and legitimate stuff with it, both. And uncertainty over legal status, that's one thing. And security and integrity, of course, is always a question with internet money or digital stuff, but so far it's been really secure. Scaling issues, how it's going to work when you have the amount of transactions that Visa has. How is Bitcoin going to handle that? That's a big question, but there's a lot of work being done with that, with the developers. The future of Bitcoin began a new type of currency, a cryptocurrency. It's a revolutionary concept. It's going to change the whole way we think about money. There's a new type of money that hasn't been existing before. How will governments react? That's a big question. Will a new currency top Bitcoin as a better one, or will Bitcoin evolve and stay on top? It changes all the time, so I don't know. We'll see what happens. So basically, it's a digital hybrid of cash and gold, replicates the features of cash into an online environment, and it's designed as a currency worth saving. And the non-political nature of Bitcoin and its robust features make it a candidate for a universal currency, in my opinion. A candidate. We don't know if it will ever grow really big, but the non-political nature of it makes it really viable to really global adoption, because there's no political stuff going on. So this is the end. Okay, so I went through it really fast. Hopefully you learned something. Could have explained a little better if I had more time. But I didn't have a Q&A session on this because it's a limited time, and I'm going to be here. We have a lot of Bitcoin experts at our stand. I'm going to be there a lot. So you can come talk to me and ask any questions you like. There's probably a lot of questions after this, and I would really like to answer them. But I'll answer them after the lecture. I'll be at the stand right away, so you can come there, talk to me. It's no problem. So that's pretty much it. Thanks to you for listening.